We're going to do something on Because Miami that we have not done before. We're going to distort someone's voice. It's going to feel like old-timey journalism because someone is going to need to stay anonymous when they join us here later, because the Proud Boys can be a violent terrorist organization. And there was a story in the New York Times this week that we're going to get to in a second with this guest. And also David Ovalle of the Miami Herald is going to join us. General Miami politics, corruption, and malfeasance that gets reported, is out in the daylight, and no longer has any consequences, just par for the course because Miami. But explain to us, Billy, before we go down the path of talking about Proud Boys and what's happening, a judge has now ruled unconstitutional. You've been howling about this stuff for a while. Has ruled unconstitutional. Again, some of the stuff that the governor of the state of Florida is trying to cram through as legislation that goes against what everyone would imagine to be this country's principles, except for the hardcore few who are down with DeSantis on just legislating things that are unconstitutional.
It's not legislation, though. It's whatever the opposite of virtue signaling is. Douchebag signaling? I don't know. It's just red meat for the base that is not only completely abusive of their power and authoritarian in its political revenge, but it also costs us money. It not only takes up real time in legislating issues that Floridians need help with, but then it also creates a situation where we have to pay millions of dollars to outside attorneys, in addition to state employees, lawyers, millions of dollars to defend plainly unconstitutional legislation. And most of these legislators are lawyers. Ron DeSantis is a Harvard-trained lawyer. He wants to rail against elites. He is a Harvard-trained lawyer, for crying out loud, okay? So this is a guy who knows when he's violating the Constitution, when he's signing a plainly unconstitutional thing. And he does it. It's this clever thing that Republicans do. They name something the exact opposite of what it is. Remember, every accusation is a confession. So this was supposed to protect free speech. This law was supposed to punish social media sites whose responsibility it is to police the content on their own websites. Because if there's hate speech, if there's people calling for, I don't know, insurrection or revolution against the government, Twitter has to be able to say, well, we can't allow this on our platform because we don't want to be responsible for the consequences of this, obviously. And this is a private company. You are not you're not in the public airwaves. This is not, this is Twitter's website, an app, effectively. They need to be able to moderate content. What he's saying is because they kicked Donald Trump off of Twitter, this was his effort, again, the opposite of virtue signaling. So they create this effort to punish big tech. This has become a buzzword for and fining social media companies for deplatforming political candidates. But they did carve out an exemption for Disney because this was this was when Disney was still in good with the ruling party, with the authoritarian governor of the state of Florida. And to no one's surprise, the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, in a ruling written by a Trump-appointed judge, said this is unfucking constitutional. It does the exact opposite. Of what the Republicans knowingly falsely claimed it did, which was try to protect the First Amendment rights of whoever, but it violates the First Amendment rights of these private companies who are saying we need to be moderators here of the kinds of violent rhetoric that appears on our websites. And this Trump-appointed judge told Ron DeSantis in the state of Florida and their multi-million-dollar legal team that the taxpayers of Florida are paying to fight this deliberately futile Sisyphean litigation. This Trump-appointed judge just because you're doing this as revenge for Trump getting kicked off Twitter doesn't make it constitutional. In fact, quite the contrary, and told him to go pound sand.
Go pound sand.
Plenty of it here in Florida.
Was that a quote, or are you just you're just using an old man phrase because go pound sand is
it's basically what I do every week on this show.
Exceptionally old phrasing.
Howl at the moon and pound sand.
I don't even know. I really
spin wheels
don't. I
and
don't
tilted
know
windmills
what
and-
pounding sand is. Telling someone to go pound sand. I don't understand any of it. Regardless, we are going to have on a guest here in a little bit, and we have to protect this person's identity. So we are going to distort their voice. But why are we doing that?
It's going to be like Deep Throat, and also like an anonymous source. I do want to clarify though that pounding sand, go pound sand, is what the AC repairman has been telling you for 2 weeks.
It is
just so
very
you know.
hot here.
To
Yes,
use it in context, you might understand.
Hopefully, we'll have it fixed by next week.
It's June in Miami
I know.
Beach.
We need air conditioning. I know, Billy. Before we get to a guest, Billy, here, that we're going to have to distort his or her voice here to protect this person because they believe they are in danger, and they're not wrong to think that they are in danger by doing this interview. So tell the people what the New York Times reported this week and why our next guest is somebody they should be listening to.
Miami Herald alum Patricia Mazzei wrote a sensational story. It's the talk of the town. It's the talk of the country this week for the New York Times. Headline, How the Proud Boys Gripped the Miami-Dade Republican Party. It was once Jeb Bush's base of power, but an influx of far-right activists and the radicalization of other members brought turmoil. There has been an anonymous Twitter account called Miami Against Fascism that has been actually doing this journalism since last summer. They are among some of Patty Mazzei's sources for this story, so we went right to the source on it. And they have been covering in extremely detailed and well-researched Twitter threads, been doing some extraordinary journalism and outing some of the right-wing extremists, many of whom participated in the Capitol riot on January 6th in Washington, D.C., and are now very active members of the Miami-Dade Republican Party. They are, in fact, committee men in the Miami-Dade County Republicans. One of them, in fact, one of these Proud Boys is running for Miami-Dade County Commission. So they're doing it the smart way. All politics is local, and they know that the best way to kind of infiltrate the government and to change things the way they want to change things, which is this is a hate group, this is a terrorist organization, this is a white supremacist, right-wing misogynist hate group whose leader, Enrique Tarrio, an Afro-Cuban from Miami, is sitting in jail right now pending a federal trial for conspiracy against the United States of America as a Proud Boy colluding with the Oath Keepers in Washington, D.C. ahead of January 6th, was plotting as they put it, a revolution, a takeover of multiple government federal buildings in an effort to impede Congress from ratifying the duly elected next president of the United States. They were looking to prevent a peaceful transition of power that has been a tradition of this country since its origins hundreds of years ago. And these are the types of people who are now in the Miami-Dade Republican Party. And these are the kinds of people who are basically running the show. But remember, the real lesson of the Trump administration and this era is that every accusation is a confession. And in keeping with that theory and keeping with that tradition, the Republicans have been accusing the Democrats of being taken over by the extremists in the left wing of the party. That has never happened. If anything, the Democrats, even to the detriment of the party, have yielded to the centrists and have been petrified of the left wing of the party. There are no extremists or in the Democrats who have any control whatsoever. That's not true in the Republican Party. The extremists are not only running the ship, but they're being enabled by otherwise mainstream or rational centrists in the party. Jeb Bush. This is the thing to remember. These people are also being embraced by Ron DeSantis. Maybe he'll appoint them to his new election police, these brown shirts, okay, this SS. This is not the fringe of the party. This is the mainstream Republican Party, and in Miami-Dade County, it is being hijacked. There was a hostile takeover by terrorists, effectively making the Miami-Dade Republicans itself a terrorist organization and forcing out the moderates, forcing out the longtime membership who have been comparatively voices of reason. But the problem is that Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump are just a symptom. They're just a symptom. Because when Jeb Bush, who is really the OG cancer of this type of extreme destructive republicanism in the state of Florida, when he was asked by the New York Times about this infiltration of the Miami-Dade Democrats, this infiltration of the Miami-Dade Republicans, which this was his headquarters, Jeb Bush. This is where, when his father was vice president and then president, and in the nascency of his political career, this is where he fostered his support, was in Miami-Dade. When he was asked for an assessment of his party's evolving identity, Mr. Bush demurred, quote, "I am out of party politics and can't comment on what is going on now." This spineless worm. Please clap for Jeb Bush. Okay, this guy, he's out of party politics except when he writes a love letter in Time magazine to Ron DeSantis, except when he shills for his family running for office in Texas. Okay, he's a real tough guy when it comes to bullying the family of a woman with tubes in her mouth, Terry Schiavo, using the power of the state to push around this family. But now he's got nothing to say about terrorist takeover because they're enablers, okay? Rene Garcia, the current county commissioner, who is the chair of the Miami-Dade Republicans, says, quote, "Yes, we have fringe elements. Yes, we have different points of view in our party. That's how we are. And my job as Republican chairman is to protect everyone's First Amendment right, however wrong they may be." The Miami-Dade Republicans have blocked me on Twitter. So not exactly the fierce advocate for the First Amendment that Rene Garcia pretends to be.
Was any of this an answer to my question of why it is we're having to anonymously introduce our next guest? You have gone on quite the tirade. I don't believe you came anywhere near answering my question why we're having our next guest on, based on what the New York Times reported this week.
No, he's just showing off his bona fides about getting blocked on Twitter by the Miami-Dade GOP.
I mean, he really is. Can you explain to us, without any further ado, why we're doing, for the first time in Because Miami history, an interview that has to be altered to protect the identity of the interviewee?
Well, when you have a political party that not only I kept using the term hijacked by these terrorists. They're not. They're yielding to these terrorists. They are giving up and enabling these terrorists. You have to think that people who have taken it upon themselves to do this reporting and out these people are concerned for their safety. And as a result, obviously, like the AC repairman here is concerned for his safety and refuses to come in
with the air conditioning.
And
okay,
we guarantee his or her anonymity. Will they come in and repair the air conditioning?
We will get to that guest next in the swampy studios we have in South Beach.
Armpit.
This person that is joining us anonymously, they're doing so as part of the organization Miami Against Fascism that was part of the reporting in this New York Times story that basically Miami-Dade's executive committee of the GOP, you've got winning seats, Proud Boy members. Billy continues to call them a terrorist organization. It's inflammatory language, but it's also not technically or by definition in any way wrong. So our guest now joins us, Billy, and how do you want to welcome this person in?
Well, this is an organization, the Proud Boys, that through threats and intimidation and occasionally violence, and in fact their leader is in jail awaiting trial for conspiracy against the United States of America. And this anonymous Twitter account popped up last summer and has been doing some extraordinary, very well-researched and documented work and threads outing some of these local fascists, if you will, who now are taking over as committee members of the Miami-Dade Republican Executive Committee. Thank you so much for joining us. The first thing I want to ask is, it's clear to me you actually are credited in Patty Mazzei's New York Times story this week, a sensational story. Clearly, your journalism is getting noticed and recognized by no less than one of the papers of record here in the United States. Walk us through this story and what is the information that you obtained and learned, and who are some of the characters in this sordid tale that opens at a fundraiser that's being headlined by Ron DeSantis at the Fontainebleau Hotel here in Miami Beach.
Sure, absolutely. And that's one part of the story, the fundraiser, then at the Fontainebleau. But overall, we helped with over a year of research and documentation, some of it stretching back before our account existed, we've been documenting, exposing, and researching not just the Proud Boys, but the activities of the far right in Miami, who've, for the most part, been operating with very little scrutiny in Miami. And as you said, there's been numerous instances of intimidation, violence linked to them. And I think that the characterization of the Proud Boys as a far-right hate group, even a terrorist group, is very fair. In fact, the Canadian government defines the Proud Boys as a terrorist organization. As far as the New York Times article and the characters that it lays out, which is actually just a piece of the larger story, the whole soap opera of the Proud Boys and the far right within the Miami-Dade GOP, is that the Proud Boys have taken have been engaged in a concerted effort over the last several years to take seats on the Miami-Dade GOP. And through our research of them, we eventually obtained a list of all the current GOP Republican Executive Committee members. So this is the executive committee that guides the policy and endorses candidates at the local level for the county, right? So we identified 7 active Proud Boy members who currently hold seats right now, and others in the past as well. But we've also even identified other participants in January 6th and other far-right groups that currently have seats or have in the past as well. And again, the New York Times piece is just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. But as far as the specific characters that the article speaks of, probably the most prominent one would be Gabriel Garcia. He's a veteran, an Army veteran, who was at J6, longtime Proud Boy, going back to the beginning. And he was arrested shortly after January 6th because he live streamed himself from his Facebook at the Capitol building. And so that was the main evidence against him. He was in conflict with the police, was maced, et cetera, and prosecutors even revealed at a recent hearing earlier this year that he, according to his own text messages, he took a knife with him to the Capitol on January 6th. And in his own words, he says it's not for defense, it's for offense. So that kind of shows you what type of character he is. Next, you have Gilbert Fonticola from Hialeah, another longtime Proud Boy, real kind of nasty one who, big, I don't know, you can't miss this guy. Real big character, irons his beard. Also at January 6th on the front lines. Him and Gabriel Garcia at different January 6th or some of the Stop the Steal rallies, which were the prequel or the warm-up to January 6th. Both of them had patches that said RWS in red letters, and what that stands for is Right-Wing Death Squads. And that's a slogan of the Proud Boys, and it just shows you this is what they're promoting: violence, right-wing terrorism. These are the type of people who wear Pinochet shirts and share helicopter memes. And as we've seen with other forms of right-wing terrorism, it's only a matter of time before it goes from memes and funny jokes to real life, right? So that said, Gilbert and Gabriel are both facing very serious charges, a six-count indictment, including a number of felonies. So they're definitely facing significant prison time.
Irons his beard?
Yes. Just check out one of our threads, our most recent thread, going into all the Proud Boys and other individuals who sit on the wreck. You can see some pictures of Gabriel, including some picture of him saying that, showing him wearing his Proud Boy regalia at his doctor's office, saying he got kicked off of dating apps, which he calls communism. In his Telegram group or channel that he quickly deleted after he was charged, was just full of nasty misogyny, towards women, homophobic content, and QAnon conspiracy as well. 2018 Miami New Times article named him as basically a pre-pandemic early follower of the QAnon conspiracy. And so we even have a video taken from his own Facebook page where he is yelling at a Wayfair truck, saying that they're shipping kids inside boxes, which was a very early QAnon-related conspiracy theory that was circulating in the far right.
Of course, something colorful happened at the Fontainebleau. What are the details of what happened at the Fontainebleau?
So what we learned about the Fontainebleau incident, largely through dueling Instagram posts by the parties involved, was there was a falling out between a woman who was a very close associate with the Miami Proud Boys, who was also at the time a Miami Moms for Liberty member. Her name is Alexandra Caballero. And they, in the fallout, it also involved a love aspect that she was dating one of the local Proud Boys. They had broken up, and then at this event, her and people who are closely allied with her were attending alongside Proud Boys and Moms for Liberty, and a woman related to her and one of the Proud Boys, Noel Salguero, got into some type of physical altercation that resulted in a police report, and now is the has taken to duly restraining orders that all the parties have filed against each other.
And so I think it's important to note that the terrorizing here is not just against Democrats or liberals or woke people or communists or socialists. It's actually internal. The fighting inside the Miami-Dade Republicans has gotten so toxic. These new right-wing extremists are terrorizing longtime members of the organization. One such woman, Liliana Ross, who's been with the party for more than 40 years, said that the meetings are a bunch of fights, people screaming, the nice people, the decent people, the people that are real Republicans are leaving. That's basically what happened. It was Republican on Republican violence at that Fontainebleau event that has resulted now in two restraining orders, one of which was delivered to this Proud Boy while he was sitting at a Miami-Dade Republican meeting. I have a few more questions for you. Maybe we could do kind of, I don't want to call them lightning round, but just short answers if you don't mind, so we can get all this in. You've done some extraordinarily in-depth internet sleuthing. It has now been vetted by no less than the New York Times and published in this bombshell story by Patricia Mazzei this week. Why did you start this Twitter account last summer, and why all the work and effort that you're clearly doing on a voluntary basis here?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, we believe anti-fascism is community self-defense. And, we practice and promote everyday anti-fascism. A lot of our tips come from community members themselves. But for us, it was because the Proud Boys began harassing, doxing, putting out the private addresses of individuals connected to the Black Lives Matter movement. And through their front group called Floridians First, they even started hosting meetups in neighborhoods that we live in, on Bird Road, at bars and restaurants. And so when it became clear that there were not just going to be a group of people who flew to Portland for protests on the weekends, but were actually going to be organizing and attacking local activists, that we had to do something. And that's when we began our research and our project to expose them and turn the tables.
What have been some of the results of your reporting? Some of these people are no longer with the organization or have had to step down from certain positions.
Well, probably the two most notable ones are Barbara Balmacido, right? She is a REC member, Republican Executive Committee member, who was also an officer in charge of voter registration. As far as we know, she resigned from her officer role. She's also been removed from various GOP, from her listing as playing different kind of GOP operative roles. But perhaps even more significantly is her boyfriend, who is Brandon Diaz. He served as the executive director for Miami-Dade GOP, and he tendered his resignation on April 29th, shortly, basically 1 week after that Fountain Blue fundraiser event. He only served 8 months in total, and after our coverage linking him to a number of far-right individuals, the Proud Boys, etc., it seems like that heat got to him.
And both Balmacido and Diaz are still currently members of the Miami-Dade Young Republicans, and Barbara Balmacido was present outside, at least, the Capitol on January 6th, and the FBI came to her house after the attack and asked for an interview, and she declined. What has been the response of local party leadership to this infiltration?
One correction on Barbara Balmacido, though, is that the New York Times said that she was outside the Capitol, but pictures clearly show her inside the Capitol, together with the Proud Boys.
What has been the response of local party leadership to your reporting?
So far, just duck and cover. They seem to not want to acknowledge the presence or the rule in any significant way, and seem to be downplaying and trying to hope that the story goes away.
Are you aware of a Proud Boy who is running for Miami-Dade County Commission, who has been endorsed by Donald Trump and has been involved in some pretty nefarious and threatening Proud Boy activities here in Dade County?
Sure, Kevin Cabrera. So we definitely know his name. We would have to say that there does not seem to be any evidence that he is a member of the Proud Boys, but we are aware of the 2018 incident that included Proud Boys, as well as various GOP operatives and himself, when they basically tried to barge into an event that Nancy Pelosi was speaking at, banging on the door, yelling, etc.
And of course, Enrique Tarrio, the chairman of the Proud Boys, state director of Latinos for Trump, is a Miami guy. The Clayton Bigsby of the Republican Party is no less than an Afro-Cuban Miami guy.
Thank you. We appreciate the time. We appreciate the insight. We appreciate the vigilant and thorough reporting, a new kind of journalism. Thank you.
Follow Miami Against Fascism on Twitter at MIA Against Fash.
Coming up next, David Ovalle with news that's less threatening, but still Miami weird. This guy, we find him with news of the weird every day. Every day something in Miami happens that's super weird, and David Ovalle is there when the weird stuff happens. He probably captures 9% of all the total weird stuff, but he captures more than most. So the latest story, you've covered crime and courts in Miami for a long time now, but the story of Jenny Nillo. Can you tell us why this story is an unusual story?
Well, so Jenny Nillo is a longtime political confidant of one of the city of Miami commissioners. And it's so typically Bush League, city of Miami, city hall story, where this woman was Commissioner Alex Diaz de la Portilla, who's part of this family that's really well known and a sort of a political dynasty here in Miami. He actually becomes sort of like the head of the CRA, which is an agency that's supposed to help impoverished neighborhoods, right? He basically gets her this no-show job at this taxpayer-funded agency, and she basically just never shows up, right? And so at some point, somebody drops a dime with the police department, and City of Miami police starts surveilling her. And they actually do a pretty good job, and they're literally watching her from like the beginning of the morning till the end of the night. And all she does is just drive around in a city issued car and just basically go from office to office, never showing up at the actual office she's supposed to work at, but instead going to his offices.
Meaning Alex Diaz de la Portilla.
Alex Diaz de la Portilla, who is not supposed to be technically her boss, right?
Right. And also, to be clear, David, she's not supposed to have a city car either, is she?
She's not supposed to have a city car. And the thing that sort of elevates it into sort of the news of the weird is she basically spends all day going to different gas stations, buying Modelo beers, and basically just pounding them in the back of, in her car, like in the back of a, Planet Fitness in Westchester.
Not her car. Not her car, David. A City of Miami car.
What are the roots?
Yes.
What's the backstory? What's the unreported stuff here? Obviously, Billy loves it when malfeasance and circumstantial things make an appearance, but tie it all together for me.
Well, we talk a lot about. Sorry, go ahead, David.
No. Basically, this is his longtime friend, man. And so he claimed he put her there to act as the eyes and the ears of the guy who was running the CRA. He was a really well-respected dude who'd been in that position for a while. But at the end of the day, it's just one of his cronies, man. This woman goes back with this family for decades, and so she'd been in prison for mortgage fraud.
Oh yeah, forgot that part. She might still be on federal probation as we speak.
I think she's still
for mortgage fraud because
and
Miami.
He's like, because Miami, and so she's like, wants to give her a second chance and but this is what ends up happening. But the thing that actually is sort of crazy to me is that we do this story. It finally details all the ins and outs of this crazy thing where they actually catch her coming out of his house in the morning, and she was running errands for him, right? That's basically what she was doing. She was picking up his dry cleaning, taking his dry cleaning, buying him liquor, doing sort of things that aren't really taxpayer related, city benefited things. And what happens? Nothing. It's just, we write the story in City Hall. It's just like accepted behavior over there.
Well, she gets pulled over though by the police while she is drinking in a city vehicle with the commissioner's dry cleaning in her car after having gone to she drank 5 beers first thing in the morning in the car. Then she goes to a liquor store, buys tequila, goes to the commissioner's home for an hour with the tequila, comes out and gets pulled over.
No, you missed it. She also drinks wine at his house in a coffee cup.
My bad. Yeah, and then, and this is while she has a $53,000 a year no-show job at the Community Redevelopment Authority, which is basically exploited as a slush fund for a lot of the commissioners who wind up being the chair of that, which Diaz de la Portilla was at the time. This woman, Jenny Nillo, gets pulled over for drinking and driving in a city-owned car. A woman who could have killed someone in a city-owned car, mind you, while drinking and driving. And what happens to her? Is she arrested for DUI?
What happens to anybody as you guys just gloss over the detail of the saddest conjuring you could imagine? Modelo in the back of a heat car in South Florida in like strip malls from here to Westchester, just running around drinking that beer in the morning is one of the saddest portraits you guys have ever painted.
Well, she did. So here was the weird thing, and I still don't have an answer on this, but they called in Miami-Dade's like DUI squad or whatever, but they didn't give her a breathalyzer. They just had her do a field sobriety. And I was talking about this with Billy. I'm like, well, of course she passed field sobriety. She's drinks 24/7. So, at 9 a.m. after a couple beers and a glass of wine, she's not going to fail a field sobriety test. So she did not get arrested for DUI. She gets fired from the CRA that day, but the commissioner just ends up hiring her to his staff
for $40,000 a year. Now she's working directly for Alex Diaz La Portilla.
But a $12,000 pay cut on a job that she wasn't doing.
I'm sorry. To this day, she works there, drunk driving a city-owned vehicle. And what did the city manager say about this when you called to Art Noriega?
They said it is the city commissioner needs to answer all questions.
What?
There. And we specifically asked. We're like, hey man, like, isn't there like a liability thing? Like, what if she gets into a car accident and you guys knew that she has this problem with drinking and driving in the city vehicle, and she just punted everything to the commissioner's office, even though technically she's a city employee, he has authority over her, but that's the city of Miami, man.
And the police, actually, she agrees to be interviewed on an audio recording that you obtained. She doesn't even know the name of her boss, of her direct superior at the CRA at the time. Instead of Jason, she calls him James.
It's a totally made-up job, correct? There is no the job, or it's not totally made up.
Yes,
it's a job that somebody should have, but instead she's getting dry cleaning and drinking beers.
Her only qualifications were she served 36 months in federal prison for mortgage fraud and was on probation at the time that he compelled this agency, which is theoretically an independent agency, not directly for the city, even though it's taxpayer money. But this slush fund of an operation, which was totally, it was an ATM machine for the Hardiman crime family and Keon Hardiman when he was the chairman. Because what they're allowed to do is they're allowed to give money away to the private sector. They're allowed to give money away to developers and owners of businesses. And so they obviously yield that power and authority to get kickbacks and payoffs. And so DLP was actually briefly removed as the chairman. I guess I don't know if this was sort of punitive or not, but here's what I want to talk about. David, did you cover the previous, it might have been Joey Fletchis, but earlier this year, another female aide of Alex Diaz-Leportilla, was in the car with him when they got into a car accident with his sergeant-at-arms driving another city-owned vehicle. And again, the police chief was allegedly called, the city attorney was called in, and it turned into this big cover-up where the commissioner refused to provide his ID. His name didn't appear as in the accident report as dictated by police policy. This is a pattern or practice here.
David, how are there not consequences to any of this? Like, I don't understand. You guys are doing the reporting, you're doing the vetting, you're doing the shaming, you're putting it in front of people. There's outrage when people hear about it. How is it that this keeps happening? Like, what are we doing? Like this, wasn't there once upon a time the shame of having something like this written about you was enough to end your political career?
That was the thing that I was actually thinking about that this morning, is that, and I hate to say it because I think it speaks a lot to legacy media's waning influence, right? The Miami Herald. I mean, when the Miami Herald did something, like, it was, a huge, black eye for you, but everything is so decentralized. They're just speaking to their constituents on, Radio Mambi or whatever, or Mega TV, and that's it. It's sort of like, it's just so many. There are
no journalistic checks and balances in the city of Miami, one of the most corrupt cities in anywhere in the world. There are no journalistic checks and balances because the things can be reported, but there are no consequences to reporting.
There are checks, but no balances, effectively.
I think that would be pretty fair to say. I mean, certainly it's a lot more tough. It's sort of like, there's just so much crazy stuff that happens, and the news cycle moves so fast that within a couple of days, this thing is forgotten. He's yet to answer any of our questions, and that's it. And no one raises a fuss. I mean, these things used to sort of spill out in the city
and doesn't have to answer your questions. It could be that brazen that you can have Carollo and people like this just not even trying to conceal the corruption, not even trying to conceal it. It's out in front of everybody, and there are no consequences. Zero. You're telling me zero consequences.
Well, so there could be consequences in that the Ethics Commission is still investigating it. So
sad trombone.
What is that going to do?
Ethics Commission? They're toothless.
Yeah, it'll be some fines or something maybe, but certainly there won't be any criminal consequences.
Why wasn't she arrested for DUI? Why isn't he under investigation for abusing his office and abusing taxpayer dollars? Why aren't there crimes here?
Well, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement looked at it, and they said there wasn't enough to keep going with a criminal investigation. So it ended up just going to ethics.
Well, what does that mean?
These guys.
What does that mean? What do you mean there's not enough? You put it in the paper. It's hard to get in the paper. It's vetted and sourced.
So the city of Miami police did nothing. Miami-Dade County police did nothing. The state attorney did nothing, and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement did nothing. And this sends such a message, Dan, of impunity to these guys, where they literally commit crimes on live TV from the dais in their official capacity, and nothing happens. There is no consequence for it. David, could you please describe to us what's on the audio recording? Because we're going to kick to it. So can you just describe for us what's on the audio recording that you obtained?
Yeah. So the audio recording is of an interview that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement did with Jenny. And it's actually pretty stark because she pretty much admits, she's like, yeah, I'm going to get fired. I know I was drinking. I was at the commissioner's house. He asked me to bring him liquor and I'd pick up his dry cleaning. And so I go there, and she's like completely candid.
She confesses to drinking and driving unequivocally.
Oh, 100%. I mean, they have surveillance footage and video and photos of her. I mean, they've been watching her do it for like a week. And at some point, I think she almost even ran over some kid outside of school or something. And she's still a city employee.
Okay, and for the record, today we're talking to Jenny Nillo about an ongoing FBLA investigation. Jenny, could you tell us, you were stopped today earlier, and do you have any idea why you were stopped?
Because I was observed buying a beer and drinking in a city of Miami car.
Okay. And you drink, right. And you do understand drinking and driving is against the law, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how many beers did you have today?
2.
You had 2 beers a day, and how much wine or any alcohol intake, liquor did you intake today?
I had a cup of wine.
A cup, just 1 cup of wine?
Yes.
And where did you have that wine at?
At the apartment.
At what apartment?
My boss's apartment.
And who is your boss?
Commissioner Diaz de la Portilla.
Commissioner Diaz, that's your boss?
Yes.
Okay. So, do you work for the city of Miami?
No, I work for the Community Redevelopment Agency, Omni CRA.
You work for the Omni CRA?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know who the director of the Omni CRA is?
James Walker.
James Walker?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Walker.
Mr. Walker. He's not your boss?
He's my immediate boss, but the chairman was the one, he's the one that put me in that position as a community liaison with the Omni CRA.
Okay. All right. And I just want to go back. So, give me your activities of this morning. What did you do?
I went to the gas station.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to pick up a key.
What did
At
you
my
do at
house.
the gas station? I need you to be clear for me.
I bought a beer.
Okay.
And then from there, I went to my house to pick up a
Did you
key
drink the beer in the parking lot, or you drank it on the way home, or where did you drink it at?
on the way home.
Okay. All right.
Then I picked up the key. Then I went to a friend of mine's house because she had left her keys in my purse. She got confused and put it in my purse. So I took them to her house. I threw it in her porch because I had to go. So I left, and then I went back to on 87th. I stopped at the gas station again,
Okay.
and I bought another beer.
Yeah, another beer. Okay.
And I went to Jensen's liquor store to buy liquor that I was told to buy.
Who told you to buy the liquor?
My boss asked me to buy it for him. I bought it at the liquor store on 22nd.
Your boss who?
Commissioner Diaz de la Portilla.
Okay.
So I bought the liquor, and then I went to his apartment.
Okay. And you gave the liquor to him and the wine?
I left it there.
You left it there. But during the time you were there,
I had a cup of wine, but I had it in a coffee cup, so he wouldn't see me drinking it.
so he wouldn't see you drinking it?
Yes.
Okay. And then you left?
Yes, I left with the cleaners, the dry cleaning, to take it to Paris Cleaners.
Yeah. We don't have the greatest timing around here, but Roy has finally found a sad sound that Billy was requesting.
Thank you, Roy.
You wanted the sad trombone.
God
There
bless
is
you.
the sad trombone. When corruption in Miami is reported by David Ovalle, the consequences are? When the Miami Herald reports anything these days, no matter how scandalous, what happens? All of Miami's politicians can do whatever the hell they want, even though Billy Corbin comes in every week and yells into microphones and nothing changes. It's cool, but tell the people why they need to know the name Leonard Abess.
Leonard Abess was the best of Because Miami last week, an extraordinary event at a county commission meeting. He is a Miami native. He's a retired banker. His family's been here for over 100 years. He says he may very well be the largest private He says he may very well be the largest private landowner in Miami-Dade County. He owns 160 of 800 acres of protected farmland that speculators and lobbyists and lawyers want to expand the urban development boundary in order to develop into warehouses, shops, and a hotel that will disrupt Everglades restoration and water flow into Biscayne Bay. I've just mentioned our two most precious natural resources, not just from a tourism perspective, but actually from like sustaining life and making Miami-Dade habitable for human life. This is not for affordable housing or housing of any kind, not even luxury condos. This is for warehouses in South Dade, more retail shops, and another friggin' hotel. And this is farmland right now. It has been farmland for generations. It is farmland that is utilized year-round with extraordinary crops. He points out that farming And agriculture is already the second biggest industry in Miami-Dade County. And during the pandemic, it became the number one industry in Miami-Dade County. And here is a man, a very wealthy man, one of the county's, if not the county's largest private landowner. And he owns 160 of these 800 acres that they want to pave paradise and put up warehouses. And he came out and said, vote no on this scheme. We have an urban development boundary for a reason. It says this is where development ends. We expand it very rarely. The commission, I think, hasn't done it since 2013 because we don't want to infringe upon the protection and safety of our natural resources. He came out and he said, if you approve this, my family will have a windfall of over $100 million. But there is no profit if you lose your soul. And I will not lose my soul. I will not turn my back on this community. We are not in alignment with this development one bit, and we consider it, my family considers it, one of the biggest frauds on this community, the big lie in our community, and a con game.
I was born in Miami 74 years ago. My family came here 105 years ago. For a better life, we got one, and we try to give back to our community. And when my family came here 105 years ago, they bought their food from the same farming families that are farming today. And we are not in alignment with this development one bit, and we consider it, I consider it, my family considers it, one of the biggest frauds on this community, the big lie in our community, and a con game. If you vote to approve this and it is upheld, my family will have a windfall of over $100 million. There is no profit if you lose your soul. And I will not lose my soul. I will not turn my back on this community. You asked if people have been paid. Not only have I not been paid, but I will forego any profit I can make on this and do what I can to try to convince you not to do this, okay? This is about money. Understand something. The only beneficiaries of this are sitting behind me wanting to kill me right now. These are the only people who will benefit from this. When Steve Green tells you that this study is bunk, it is bunk. I made a living as a banker. I wouldn't allow any of this stuff on a loan application. They are paid for. They are paid for. It is not true. And if you want, I'll come back and tell you that we don't irrigate on this land very much. We don't pollute, and it's in the best interest of our community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you again.
Mayor, County Commissioner Rebecca Sosa, who has been inexplicably in office for like 34 years, says, this was incredible. I've never seen anything like this.
It's crazy.
And then she voted for it. Now, because Miami, there were several holdouts, and they could see that they were losing some of the votes and support that they thought they had on it. They needed 9 out of the 13 to vote for it.
From your perspective, this is as overt as you will trade future life and the ability to live in South Florida for money to be made now. That is the essence of that vote.
The way Miami is going now, if I were him, I would have just taken the $100 million for crying out loud.
Because there's no going back. He's throwing away $100 million because development will overrun this place, even though we don't have the infrastructure. They will build on Everglades farmland, and eventually we will end up not having drinking water in Florida or in Miami because of stuff like this. And it's not 50 years away. It's closer than that.
Yes. And so this 800-acre industrial park development in farmland that will harm the Everglades and Biscayne Bay failed to pass that day, but the developer saw the writing on the wall. They could see that they didn't have enough votes. They need 9 of 13. 5, all of a sudden there was 5 commissioners who were expressing concerns or discontent. And so what they did was they did a really slick bait and switch. They were about to vote and lose. And then they quickly, but like in the middle of a vote, I don't even know if this is legal under the county charter, the developer asked the chairman, Pepe Diaz, Commissioner DUI as we call him, for good reason. He is a supporter of this scheme. They said, Chairman, can we move to delay the vote? And they let them delay the vote. And rest assured, this thing will pass probably in June. But they didn't want to be embarrassed by everybody who was there, because at the next meeting, what they did was they continued the meeting, which means that there'll be no more public comment, which means that it's just a continuation of the meeting. We've already opened and closed public comment, so no one needs to bother to show up, and we can quietly pass this scheme. Yeah, and I think I know which county commissioners are gonna flip and vote for it too. But it's not often that you have a hero like this who comes forward in Miami.
Something positive who will get run over because negative is what runs over positive in Miami.